Welcome back to IamUgie. Um, Picking up where I left off, I was leaving Belfair, and I got placed with my second foster family, which was a black family. They lived in Bedford, so during the transition process, or after I had transitioned from Belfair, and got placed with them. I was going back and forth between Heskett Elementary or Heskett Middle School, and then I would be transported to Belfair Middle School on the little short bus, the little short yellow bus with the special needs kids. Um, and I would sit in the back and ride a bus to and from. I used to hate riding that bus because everybody would see me getting off of the bus and getting on the bus when I was going to Heskett Middle School. Um, During that time, I was 13 years old and getting placed with them. Um, they didn't know too much about me, I should say, other than what they were told from Belfair. But at that time, I was 13 years old. I was fully sexually active. I had a addiction at a young age because in Belfair, having sex a lot with a teenage girl, it learned to become my coping mechanism that I was using. So I was using sex as a way to cope with the inner pain or the inner issues that I was feeling and the emptiness, the void that was inside. Um, During intimacy with a girl, I feel like, I felt like, whoever I was with at that time, I felt like, yo, this is, they loved me, but in reality, it wasn't love. It was just two teenagers that were in lust. Um, but and hormones and stuff. But I used it as a coping skill, so I developed an addiction for it. It's like I craved sex, and I craved getting high, smoking weed all the time because when I would smoke weed, it was like nothing else mattered. I would laugh a lot, giggle a lot. Um, so to me, those two things were like my coping skills. When I was there, or when I was living with them, the first few weeks I was there, my foster brother got mad at me because I didn't want to get up, and I think I said something smart to him, and he hit me in the knee with a hammer. It's funny now, but he hit me in the knee with a hammer, and that pissed me off. And I jumped up out of the bed trying to fight him, and he wrestled on the wrestling team or whatnot. And of course, he pinned me up all around the room, and we was knocking into dressers and stuff. And my foster mom come in there and yelling what's going on, and she he tells her what's going on or whatever. I'm telling her that he hit me with a hammer, so she gets on him, and basically we both got in trouble. But um, as time went on, uh, that summer, I pretty much, was just during the summertime. My foster mom would go to work. My foster brother would be at work. My foster sister would be at work. She lived underneath us. was home by myself, and so I was on the prowl looking for a girlfriend. So I used to hang out with this one kid, and I used to go over to his house. He lived across the road. We lived on Libby Road at the time, and I lived in some apartments called Stony Brook. And across Libby Road was some tall apartment buildings. I think they were called Southgate apartment buildings, but I had a friend that stayed over there. And I would go over to his house, and we would smoke weed, and he had this girlfriend, and it was a white girl. And she was a redhead. And I hooked up with her. Her name was Tanya. And I hooked up with her, even though it was his girlfriend. They ended up breaking up or whatnot, but I hooked up with her, and she became my girlfriend. And, she would come over in the morning when she would catch the bus all the way from Euclid. I mean, this girl was coming far out from Euclid, and I think she was 14 at the time. And she would catch the bus all the way out from Euclid to come see me in the morning, and I let her in the house or whatnot. And, we did what we did, but I was addicted to it. And like I said, it was a way that I used to cope. And it was a few times where I would sneak and catch the bus. I'm supposed to be outside, and I wasn't outside, and I would catch the bus, or I was outside, but I wasn't in the neighborhood. But I would catch the bus from Bedford all the way to Euclid. Well, to get to her house, you had to ride the bus from Bedford through Warrensville Heights, through Shaker Heights, through Cleveland Heights, all the way down to East Cleveland. I'm 13 years old at the time, so keep this in mind. So I get off the bus in East Cleveland, and then I would have to catch the 6 all the way down Euclid, all the way till it didn't run no more. It was drop you off, or it would drop you off at I would get off at, I think it was a Rascal House pizza place, all the way down Euclid. And then I would have to get off the bus and then walk down, I think 2 or 3 more streets, 3 more blocks to get to East 200th Street. And then I would have to walk all the way down East 200th Street, which was probably, I want to say a mile, maybe 2 miles. It was a pretty good hike. And walk all the way down to Crystal just to see her. And I would sneak and do that. And then I would catch the bus all the way back. Sometimes I would get yelled at or get fussed at because I came back in the house before, right when it was getting dark, so like 9 o'clock, I'm walking in the house and they haven't seen me all day. So I would make up some story about where I was at. But one time I went down there and to see her, and I almost got jumped by a bunch of guys or a bunch of teenagers or whatnot, because simply I was just in the wrong neighborhood. That's the best way to sum it up. I was in the wrong neighborhood. At the time I had on I think they were Tommy Hilfiger shoes or something. My sister had purchased me, my real sister. And they were trying to jump me or whatnot, so we went over to her girlfriend's house to chill out there and wait until they leave or whatnot. But while we were headed up there, as they were following us, one guy, pulls out a gun, and he was like, "Hey, let me talk to you," because he wanted my shoes. But I wasn't trying to give up my shoes, and they were at a good distance away from us. So me and her, we took off running up this hill to her girlfriend's house and stayed at her girlfriend's house. And I had to call my foster mom. I did not want to do it, but I had to call home, and I talked to my foster mom, and she was mad. Oh, she was mad because what am I doing way on the other side of Cleveland? And how did I get there? So my foster sister came and she picked me up or whatnot from this girl's house and took me home. That was one of the little funny incidents that I had chasing tail or whatever, trying to feed my addiction. Being there, living there, I had got in contact with Smokey, because for whatever reason I would talk to him here and there. He was still my father. I just knew that, one, he did want me, and I looked at him differently. But I got in contact with my father, so I used to sneak and meet my dad at Southgate. He would come up there to Southgate to meet me and sit in the car. I would sit in the car with him in one of his Cadillacs and smoke cigarettes with him and talk. And he would tell me about things he was doing, which was nothing to me at the time. But I just enjoyed, just sitting in the car with my dad. Even though he felt how he felt towards me, as a kid, like I said, you just want your parents to love you, to accept you or whatever. And, so I would just enjoy sitting in the car with my dad. Sometimes he would take me to the movies. There used to be a movie theater up there at Southgate, and we would go watch movies, and this man would light up cigarettes and smoke cigarettes inside the movie theater, because wouldn't nobody else be in there but me and him, because the movie theater was shut in the process of shutting down. So a lot of the times there wasn't really many people in there, so he didn't care. He'd light up a cigarette, smoke a cigarette inside the movie theater. During that time also, or a little bit further forward, I had I'm not gonna say where, but I got a hold of a gun, and it was a little Taurus 25. It had 7 bullets in it, and when I got a hold of it, for me, I felt protected. I felt like, oh, nobody's gonna hurt me now. Nobody's ever gonna, do anything to me. And so I had a little 25 I used to keep in my pocket, and I used to store it in the garage, because the apartments had garages, and my sister had like this old Chevy, I think it was a Nova, a little Chevy Nova. It was white in color, and my foster sister did, and she just had it parked in the garage. Well, I used to climb on top of her car, and above the back of her car up against the wall was like a little cubby hole in the garage, and I would store my gun up there. I would put my gun up there, my cigarettes, my weed. That was like my little storage spot. But then whenever I would leave to go somewhere or go outside, I would go over there and grab my cigarettes and put my gun in my pocket. If I wanted to smoke a little bit, then I would roll a joint, or if I had enough to roll a blunt, I'd roll a blunt. It was this guy who lived in another apartment building next to mine, and at the time he was 25. He was 25 years old, and his name was Pepe. And he had just got out of jail or whatnot. So I used to hang with him and um, smoke weed with him or whatnot. Sometimes he'll smoke off of me. Sometimes I smoke off of him. He'll see me walking through the parking lot and he'll ask me, do I want to smoke? And sure. So, he would share his blunts with me or whatnot, give me alcohol. So I was drinking with him, smoking with him. And then I was always sit and I would tell myself, well, I got to wait till I sober up a little bit before I walk in the house. And then that's when I got hip or put on to Visine, putting Visine in my eyes before I come in the house. But I think a lot of times my foster mom could tell that I was high, or my sister did too, because she would be like, your eyes glassy. Why your eyes glassy? Like my foster sister used to always be on my head. But yeah, during that time I also started trying to make some money for myself. So I had met a guy and I asked him to, basically put me on. So he put me to the test and he gave me what I thought at the time was crack cocaine. But me not knowing anything about it, as far as like selling it and stuff, I was like, well, my brother's not around to teach me. So I looked up to this guy to show me the ropes. And this guy, he would sell or whatnot, and he had, nice clothes and stuff like that, and I wanted that. I was a kid or a little kid or a little teenager. That's the stuff I wanted. So he put me to the test by giving me what I thought was crack cocaine. Come to find out, it was just little cut up pieces of soap that was bagged up in the corners, and I called myself trying to be dope boy, and I'm on the corner of Libby Road in Northfield, walking back and forth, just pacing, waiting on somebody to stop me and ask if I'm selling or not. So one time I was standing out there and I stood out there for hours and it was hot. So I decided to walk back to the front of the apartment entrance and I sat down or the driveway for the apartment and I sat down on these steps in the shade. And then out of the first apartment building, this dude yelled out the window and he said, hey, are you working? And I said, yeah, what's up? What you need? He said, come upstairs. So, I go bouncing upstairs or whatnot. And he said, what you selling? I said, I got rocks. And he said, that's what I'm looking for. So he said, let me get 220s. So I gave him what I was told was 220s. So he gave me the little $40, I walk up out the door and I'm happy because I done made my first sale. I get outside and I go back to the corner and literally probably 5 minutes after I walked out the door, he yelling out the window at me, telling me to bring my A upstairs. I ripped him off and this and that. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, if I have to come out there, he said, it's going to be some problems. He said, you need to bring your A back up here. So I walk back inside and I go up the stairs, see what the problem is. So as I'm walking inside the door, I'm thinking to myself, I'm slipping basically because I didn't have my little pistol on me. I left it in the garage. And I walked in there, got to his apartment door. He opened the door, he flinged the door open. He said, you sold me soap. I said, what? I said, that's not soap. He said, yes, it is. He said, it's soap. And he took a lighter. He said, look, it don't even burn. He said, and then he ran it under water and it started like foaming up. And I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I was like, hold on. I said, let me use your phone real quick. So he let me use his phone. I called the dude who's supplying me, and I said, "Yo," I said, "you got me in a situation over here," and I said, "You gave me soap," and he started laughing on the phone, and he said, "You passed the test." He was like, "Where are you at?" And I said, "I'm near my house." He said, "I'm on the way." He said, "Tell the dude I'm on the way to bring him to real thing, and I'll be there in like 20 minutes." So I told him, and I sat in the house, in this dude's house, and waited 20 minutes for my man to show up or whatever. And he show up, and he calls the phone. The guy answers and hands me the phone. I go outside. I go get the reel. I bring it back to him. I give it to the guy. As soon as I gave it to him, he put it on the pipe and hit it. Boom. You know, and started coughing and everything. He said, "Oh, yeah." And then when he said, "Oh, yeah," I just walked out the door because I knew he was satisfied. So I go back down to the car. And I said, "Yo," I said, "you could have got me in a situation, I said, I was in a situation right there. I said, you could have got me hurt or killed or anything." And I said, "I don't even have my pistol on me." And he was like, "Well, that's your fault for not having your pistol on you," which, true, it was. But luckily, it didn't go down like that. But he was like, "I just wanted to make sure that you wasn't scared to do this and that you wasn't going to try anything funny." So he started laughing, and then he gave me a handful of rocks, and he gave me a couple $100, and he said, "Here you go." So I went to work from there and trying to sell rocks. So I would walk back and forth. There used to be a motel on the corner of Libby Road in Northfield. So I would walk up into the motel because there used to be a lot of crackheads up in there, and I would go through the motel and sell crack, selling my little rocks to people and stuff. And one time I got called into a room. They seen me. Some guys seen me walking. They poked their head out the window and said, "Hey, you holding?" I said, "Yeah, what you need?" So they waved me over to come over. So I walk up to the door, and I go inside, and there's like money on the table. And one guy was like, okay, one guy wanted a 20, this guy wanted 40, another guy wanted 60. And there was, they was like, "Oh, this is for a guy in the bathroom. He wants this amount." And I said, "Who in the bathroom?" I was nervous, but I wasn't too nervous because I had my pistol on me this time. And they was like, "Oh, it's just one of our friends. He said just give him a 20 or whatever." Well, come to find out, years later, I wouldn't find out till years later, but that guy that was in the bathroom was my uncle, or he was foster relative or whatever, foster uncle. And I wouldn't find out till it wasn't like years later. It was probably like a year later, a few months later or whatnot, because he became very close to me. Like, he talked to me a lot about trying to get me to do the right thing or whatnot. But shortly after that, I go back to the house, and I'm at the house going back and forth every day. And my foster mom said, "I know what you're doing out there, and you need to stop because that's not a life to have, and you won't have a future. The only options out there in the streets is either dead or in jail." And me being deceptive, I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm not out there. I'm not doing nothing, yada, yada, yada." Well, the whole time I ain't realized that my uncle had told her what I was doing. So time went on, and as as all that was going on and stuff, I'm still messing around with the white girl, um, trying to sell crack, trying to be somebody, trying to find myself and make money because my foster mother bought me clothes, but it wasn't the clothes that I wanted. I wanted the real, at the time, the clothes that were in style in the late 90s. It was like, I think it was like FUBU had just came out and stuff like that, and it was like Coogee. I think it was called Coogee. But like Coogee sweaters and stuff like that. That stuff was expensive when it came out, but that's what I wanted. So I figured, well, I'll get it however I can. So when I would have like little money and buy stuff, my foster mom like, where you get that from? And I'm like, oh, my dad bought it for me, or my dad gave me some money. she knew that smoke ain't give me nothing. Um, but as time went on there, I ended up hanging out at the manager's house a lot, the managers of the complex, and I don't remember their names, but I do remember their friend name, and her name was Lisa, and I only remember her name because Lisa was a blonde haired girl with big breasts, and being 14-year-old kid, 13, 14 years old, that had a sex addiction, I was always looking at her. So they had a kid, both of them had kids that would be playing outside in the front, but for whatever reason, they would let me hang out with them, So when I would hang out at Lisa's house, smoke cigarettes, uh, they were all white, so they drank Budweiser at the time. So I would drink Budweiser and sit there, and I'd get drunk and throw up over the porch, and they would laugh at me and stuff like that. So that's where I went. It was like my hangout place. And my foster mother was like, "Why you always want to hang out down there?" I was just like, "Oh, they teaching me stuff, whatever. I help out, with them doing maintenance." Like, cause I would carry the tools sometimes around when they would have to like repair stuff in the different apartments. And but as time went on, the manager's wife, I cannot remember her name. I want to say her name was Michelle, but she started smoking crack, and I watched how crack takes a perfectly normal family and destroy it. And I was probably about like 14 years old around this time. So I would go there and hang out with them or whatnot. And because I was helping them around the apartment complex or whatnot, sometimes I'd be allowed to, just spend the night over there because from the looks of it, nothing was going on. I'm just there working and hanging out, and they're cool peoples or whatever. Everybody knew them. Everybody knew who they were. So I would sit there and spend the night and get drunk and throw up, drink as much Budweiser as I could till I threw up, smoke as much weed as I could. Sometimes I would smoke their weed. But when they started smoking crack and getting it from me, it was just, looking back now, it's like I feel bad, but at the time, I didn't really care. But I watched how crack took a perfectly good family and destroyed them. Her friend Lisa, that was in the apartment upstairs, I watched her smoke and I watched how her breast shrank. I watched how her face just shriveled up, and one time I was in the car with them, riding with Lisa, and I think her name was Michelle. I'm gonna just say her name was Michelle. And we ended up in front of the police station in Bedford in a parking lot because she had to go there for something, and they're sitting there in the car smoking crack in front of the police station, and I'm in the back seat. And I was 14 years old, 14 years old. And I watched how they stopped caring about their own kids. Michelle started stealing the people's rent money because, like, people would turn in their money for rent in cash. But she was taking this cash and spending it to buy crack. Sometimes it was for me, sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes I just didn't have any to sell. I was out. So I watched how crack basically destroyed two whole families, and that was crazy to me looking back at it. Um, I'm trying to think what all happened during that time. Oh, one time I finally got in contact with my brother Roy after our years had passed, and I haven't seen him since I was taken away from him. So I got in contact with him. He talking about, oh, that we're gonna go to Cedar Point. I should go. I should go. But it's like I had to get permission for wherever I went because I was always up to something or into something. So it was like I always had to get permission to go somewhere. So I asked if I could go, and at the time, County and them didn't want me to see my family, didn't want me to go anywhere near my family. But my foster mother let me go, and I remember seeing my brother. I was so happy to see him again, and it was my brother, my cousin Robert, and his girlfriend Brandy, and we in the car mobbing to Cedar Point. And, we young, or my brother was obviously older than me, but I was young. But we in the car, smoking weed, windows rolled up, we flying down the highway. Um, Windows rolled up. My brother had a whole ounce of weed, and we flying down the highway. And I got a pistol on me, and my brother didn't know what type of person I had became. So it's like part of my deceptions that I used to have I used to try to remember how they saw me or how they viewed me last. So whenever I was around my brother, it was kind of like the portray the whole soft Charles thing, because I didn't want him to see how messed up of a person I became. So I didn't want my brother to see that, oh, his little brother is carrying a gun. He probably would have snatched it from me, and then I would have been mad because I don't have a blower, and I was out doing the things that I was doing. So I didn't tell him. But we flying in the car, his windows rolled up, smoking blunt after blunt. And my brother it was like an ounce weed on him at the time and dropping acid. And yeah, we went to Cedar Point and we had fun, and he had the weed on him, and we went on this roller coaster ride that it throws a bunch of water at you. I forget what it was called, but you ride on like these logs or something, or these roller coasters that look like logs, and it throws a bunch of water on you. And you obviously get soaked, and the weed got wet. So driving back home, he was trying to dry it out. They rolled a blunt and dried it out on the dashboard of the car, turned the heat up with the windows down, drying out the blunt so we could smoke it on the way back home. And we got back to my brother's house, and I remember I told my brother, I said, "Hey, I gotta go. You gotta take me home." And he was like, "Why can't you just spend the night? I'm your brother." And it was like he didn't understand that, I'm not even supposed to be over here. I can't stay the night. So I had to be driven home. And so he drove me home, and I had seen that was when I had seen my brother during that time, and I enjoyed that time, being a kid or whatnot. Um, but as time went on, um, I continued to basically be reckless, but try to hide it. So it's like when I came in the house, I always made sure I went back to being that little quiet kid from Belfair, because I had learned to deceive Belfair enough to where they thought I was okay to let me out. So I didn't want to go back to Belfair, so I always had to pretend that I was this okay, normal kid, I guess. But in reality, I wasn't normal. I was tormented on the inside by things I had experienced. And so, of course, I continued to not do well academically. Um, at this time, I think I was like in the ninth grade. So I didn't have to be transported back and forth to Belfair, but I still had to go to the SBH classes all day long. I think I had maybe one class that was like a normal class. No, two classes. One of them was gym, and the other one was English. But for all the rest of my classes, I had to stay in this SBH class, which was all the way in the back by the shop classes in Bedford. And I would sit there and look at all the other high school girls walking by and lusting after them, but knowing that none of them would talk to me because I looked bummy. The way I dressed was bummy. I didn't have the nice clothes like all the other kids, which I used to call them mama ballers, because they come to school stunting, driving their parents' car and this and that. So it's like I hated kids like that because, I'm like, I don't know what that's like. To have your mama, your daddy buy you nice clothes and stuff. I'm like, So the during that time, while being in the ninth grade, um, sometimes I would get into. I had a friend who was also in the SBH class with me, and I became close to him because he was from Harvard. So, he was always in there throwing up HVD and this and that, and banging against Bedford had this little clique or whatever. They call themselves the Red Eye Clique. So, they wore red, a little Scully hats that said Red Eye on it. And he used to always, get into it with them. and I would be there. There used to be three of us, and it was me, a guy named Van, and Dion, who was from Harvard. And sometimes we would go behind. I think it was a pizza place across the street by a Catholic school, and we'd go back there, and that's where the fights would take place, and let people run their ones and shoot their one-on-one fades with each other or whatnot, and then walk home from school. Sometimes the fights would break out in the hallway. But then I'd go home like it was just a normal day at school, wasn't talking about nothing. But during that time, I was trying to be accepted still by somebody, by anyone, or gain somebody's approval. So I tried out for the wrestling team in the 9th grade because I wanted to impress my brother, my foster brother, because he was a wrestler. And I looked up to him because he was smart. He was smart. He had his head on his shoulder. At the time, he had the cute Puerto Rican girl he was messing with. And so I looked up to him. And I tried out for the wrestling team, but whenever I had wrestling matches, nobody ever came. And that, it made me not want to perform, as a wrestler. It made me not care. And plus, I didn't like the fact of wearing tights and being all sweaty and hot, sliding all over another man or a boy at the time. So I gave up on that because nobody ever came to none of my matches, and I didn't care about, winning or anything like that no more. So I just went back to just trying to figure out who I was, trying to find myself. So being young at 14 years old, I didn't want to go outside and play. My foster mom used to always fuss at me because I would spend a lot of my time sleeping in my room because I was depressed. So I would be in my room and I would sleep all day. I was on medications at the time, and I can't tell you which one because, Bedford, they diagnose you with this and that, and next thing you know, you eating medications like they're Skittles. So, but my foster mother, she helped wing me off my medication because she kept telling me, you don't need them, you're okay, you're a normal kid, things happen in life, this and that. She tried to talk to me and guide me the best she could, and she did get me taken off my medications. But being 14 years old, she would tell me, go outside, go play. She reminded me of like my first foster parents, how they wanted me to just be a kid. I was back in the country, be a kid, but my concept or my mentality of a child was stripped from me. So I didn't want to go outside and play, baseball with the kids and stuff, but I would do it just to get out the house, just to keep her from fussing at me about being asleep. So I'd get out the house and I'd go out the house and play baseball. Well, I would also get into trouble because I was doing dumb stuff. And the stuff I should have got caught for, I didn't, but I'm not going to say what all I was doing, but I was 14 years old and I was doing home invasions. I was breaking inside people's houses. I was breaking inside of shops. I'm not going to say which ones, but yeah, I was 14 years old going up inside people's houses. So a lot of times it was like I felt like I was just exploring, because a lot of times I didn't even take anything. I just wanted to see how other people lived. If that makes any sense. It was weird. So it's like I would go inside people's houses and just walk around and just look at their stuff, and see how they were living. And I would leave. And sometimes I would take stuff. But for the most part, it was just interesting to me to just see how different people lived. Um, far as like certain shops and stuff or stores that I would break into, I'm not. I want to speak on it, but I'm not going to speak on it. So, but yeah, I was 14. I was bad at 14. I'll just say that I was doing some stuff I shouldn't have been doing. A lot of times, the stuff I did get caught for is because somebody else got busted for doing something stupid, and they tried to pin it on me. It was this one time. It was this white kid I used to hang out with. His name was Mark, and it used to be a PetSmart that was behind the store or behind the apartment complex. And we would go there and look at the pets and stuff. And one day we come out and we cut through the back, and there's a forklift on the dock. So he said, "Oh, I want to drive it." I said, "Don't drive it because you don't know what you're doing." I said, "You don't know how to drive it." I said, "It's stupid." But me, instead of walking away, I stood there and watched him get on this forklift. He started it up and hit the gas, and he drove it right off the dock. And it crashed and made a big noise and broke some other stuff. So I take off running. I go one way, he go the other way. I run back to the house, and I go in the house. My mom like, "Why you breathing heavy?" I said, I forgot what I told her. I forgot. I gave her some stupid excuse. And literally a few minutes later, police knocking on the door. I'm like, "The police knocking on the door for?" Well, come to find out, Mark got caught. He turned around and told them I did it. And I said, "I didn't do that." And oh man, so long story short, it was like we had to go to court for it and everything. And I was found not guilty. But man, during that whole conflict, his mom came over and was dropping N bombs and this and that, and my foster mom wasn't having it. She was like, "You got one more time to drop the N bomb," and that white lady shut up. She shut her mouth. But I was pissed because Mark lied on me, and he was supposed to be my friend. So that whole summer, he hid from me. He did not come outside. He would, whenever I would hear that he was outside somewhere, I'll go outside looking for him because I wanted some get back. I was going to beat him down. But he ended up eventually moving, but he hid from me the whole time until his family up and moved away. Um, that's when I learned that I can't trust people, or that's when I began to learn that I can't trust people who call themselves a friend. Um, but as time went on, I obviously made it to the 10th grade. In foster care, it's like it doesn't matter if you get bad grades or not. They just keep pushing you through to the next grade, to the next grade, until they can't push you no more. So I made it to the 10th grade, and in the 10th grade, I met this girl who would become a girlfriend, but she would become my spouse. But we will talk about that in the next video. But that's it. That's all I have for today.